So our two guest artists this year, Carla Hughes from Harlingen, Texas. If you haven't been in Harlingen for a while and you want something cool to do on an art walk night, which is the last Friday in the month coming up, actually fairly soon, her spot, what is your spot's name? I should know. Carla Hughes Art. It's a really a wonderful spot where she does her thing and other artists of all media also show. It's on.
So it's right by the railroad tracks, not going downtown stretch.
So if you go to the usual Jackson, you're really close, but it's just a little hop, skip, and a jump away. And then also Julian is back with us. He's a mission native who both of our artists are products of UTPA. I guess that's the legacy institution, UTRGV. And it's really nice to have our local talent and folks that I haven't seen for a while come in to share their stories and stuff. And I'm sure I'm going to learn a few more things here. But Julian has a rich tradition in clay as a production potter and more. He's teaching sculpture at UTRGV. They both share a history of apprenticeship with a luminary figure in Central Texas, Ismael Soto. Carla did welding, I think for him, or was it clay slabs, you said, but she's done a number of things in Central Texas, and Julian did too, before they came back here to share outside of their sharing today. And it's really, I think, a wonderful show with the institutional invite collaborations in this space and their current work in this space too. So I'll turn it over. I guess Julian's talking first about the life and times of Julian Rodriguez, and Carla will follow. So I think we're in for a real treat.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming to check out the show first, and to whoever made it to the workshop for participating. If you're there, grab some clay and made some stuff. We're working on sorry, over here. Okay, there we go. So I'll just have to turn around. And so anyway, where was I? Well, yeah, at the workshop, we did a little collaboration, and hopefully we get to finish it tomorrow, which is on around the like figurative pieces, like one of these saints that I do some work with. And I don't know what's going on here. Okay, there it is. So 1989, I graduated from Mission High School, just down the road, with a couple of classes in art. I head up to Austin, Texas, St. Edward's University under the College Assistant Migrant Program. I was a migrant farm worker for the majority of my young life, up until I was about 22. Every summer we'd head to Colorado. And so I went into art because that's what I felt I was good at and I liked doing. So I started taking ceramics, probably was 1990, maybe my sophomore year. So when I get asked, like, when did you start? I can trace it to high school. I did work with some clay in high school, but it was more serious in college, ceramics 1, ceramics 2, and then I took the advanced classes several times. But if I really want to get asked where did I really get my start, I would say it's at this place right there. You might not recognize it, it's kind of cut out, but this is the first place I ever set up to try to make a living out of pottery. Once I decided I wanted to pursue pottery, to me it was more practical to be able to sell, if I wanted to make a living, $15, $20 pieces, $30, rather than sit and work on paintings for weeks and then try to sell it for, $500. That's gonna be a little outrageous, I guess. So I figured, pottery is the way to go. So I came back after I graduated and had no studio. So I enrolled in a class at UT Pan American so that I could have use of the studio. So I started there with Richard Heisland in the fall of 1995, and I would go to Austin, buy clay, and then I started learning how to fire on my own. And I think Heisling was pretty happy about that because I would fill the kiln with all the student work. So I was basically firing everybody's pieces in that semester. And I really enjoyed the high fire. It was just something about the glazes. They were just shinier and then richer, especially like the copper reds and some of the greens and blues. But the first time I saw a copper red, it looked like a candy apple. And I figured, I want to do something like that copper red. So that whole semester I would go in and make pottery. And I was gearing up for this big sale in December, right before Christmas. I'd catch everybody with their wallets open, ready to spend money. And along this road this is Nolana, right by where Tinseltown, the movie 6 is. At that time, it was an open field, so that people would line up there and sell whatever, lawn ornaments, grass, fruits, anything. So I figured this is a great place to start. So I went and set up right around there, about where the poles are, and that's a canal. You can kind of see the canal back here that runs along there. And put up a table, put out all my pottery. I had it in my mind I was gonna make a lot of money that sale. And it turns out I didn't sell any pieces that day. There was a kid running around looking at stuff that wanted to trade a mug that he liked, and he was selling lemons at 10 lemons $1. So we made a deal. I figured I'd go home with something, and that's what we made a deal for. $10 worth of lemons, which would have been 100 lemons. And he came back with the lemons and his mother, but his mom didn't want a mug. She wanted a vase. So I ended up kind of getting undercut for $10 of lemons for a $14 vase. But at that point, I was like, yeah, go ahead, take it. So I was a little discouraged, right? I thought, okay, I got to change careers now. And I went home and kind of felt bad for a bit, but I guess the break did good. And so I was going to try it again. And at that time, one of my friends, Eloy Rodriguez, he suggested, hey, let's do this again. I'll go out with you and we'll pick a better spot. Maybe that wasn't the great spot. So we set up here, started setting up every Saturday at this open field. It was on the corner, so there was traffic. So I said, yeah, that's a good spot. And this was a lot better, we'd sell $50, $100 here and there every Saturday, but it was enough to keep me going towards the next Saturday. And that's me. I don't know if you can recognize me on this side. And my pottery and Eloy's is over here on the left. And so, it was exciting every time a car stopped. It was like, all right. But then at the same time, we would be like, no, look at my stuff, not his, right? But we were both trying to make it out there. And this is the spot. I don't know, any of you familiar with it? Right there, that's our field. This is Nolana and Dove right on the corner. And, you look at back then, there was nothing. There was the Walgreens was across the street, or I think it was Walgreens, I'm not sure. And then that was it. So we did that for a while. I kept making more stuff. Headed to Canton one year, or it must have been like April. Somebody told my brother I should go up there and I would sell out. So I headed up there. Again, didn't sell anything. And we both, he forgot his wallet and I didn't have a whole lot of money because I was gonna make money. So we shared a turkey leg and a sausage on a stick between the two of us for the whole day. And well, he's a nice guy, older brother, and he told me, just leave your pottery here, I'll sell it in my office. He worked for the EPA. So that's what I did, and he would send me a check. But on the way back, I stopped in Austin, and I was like, no, I gotta change this up, I gotta do something else. So I stopped at Clarksville Pottery with Bridget Hauser and asked her for a job, and she gave me a little tryout. She liked what she saw enough to work with. And then she called me later and told me she had a position to start in May. So in May, I headed up to Austin and became a production potter, working 40 hours a week, making pottery on the wheel, which for me was fun because I really liked pottery. And there was 5 potters. It was very relaxed. It was like, I don't know, the atmosphere was me and from South Texas, working with a bunch of hippies. So that was a good thing. And you think of hippies of like the 60s. Well, there was a lot of contemporary hippies too. It's kind of like that lifestyle just kept going. It didn't end there. So worked there for 14 months. Then I met Ishmael. He asked me if I wanted to work for him. And so I went out to his ranch. Then he introduced me to Phil Guile, which was another potter from the Austin area. And then they were paying me by the piece, so that was more lucrative for me. So I went and worked for them. And plus I didn't have to clock in and punch in those 8 hours a day. So that worked out better for me. And so some of my work that I do the production was something I picked up from Ishmael and Stan Irving, my professor, was working with wax resist, this combining glazes. And so I developed this the design with those lines. It's supposed to be diagonal lines. I incorporate that in my pottery as moving forward, diagonal lines, moving forward, motion, not standing still. Some of my old pieces here. And so this is me in Kingsville. I would set up wherever there was a sale, go try to hawk my wares around McAllen. I did they used to have that sale in the downtown area, fajita cook-off, the Harlingen, was it Market Days, street fair. I would go over there and just, trying to make a living out of this. And this is one of the fairs in Kingsville. So I hadn't noticed, there's a little figure down in one of those platters. So high fire glazes, cone 10, cone 11, that's what really attracted me to this type of pottery, with, the Japanese, Chinese traditions. And so here's some of my pottery work. This is a crackle glaze, and it's just a jar. You can see the Chinese influence in the shape. And then I started making bigger pieces. Escape. I don't know what that means, but I'll just keep going. So a lot of my early works, I don't have pictures. It was before cell phone cameras. And also I was pulling them out of the kiln and I was trying to sell them. So there's probably some around that somebody probably tell me, hey, look, I got one of your pieces from back then. And these are some of the bigger pieces. These are all, or this one's about 22 inches in height. And I was playing around with mesquite, mesquite ash. And I also started doing stacked work. And this one I was just doing with blue and orange, trying to do the complementary colors. Based on an idea I've had of like palm trees, and Brancusi's endless column. So I started doing some shapes like that, and they would taper off towards the top. And here's another, just multiple glazes, playing with the surface of what glazes are going to create in the firing. And for me, that was part of the excitement, was that opening the kiln. And sure, you think, okay, it's gonna look kind of like this, right? If it's a blue, it's gonna be a blue or a green, but some of them were a little more tricky in combinations. So there's about 3 different glazes on here. There's a Shino, a green, and then sprayed mesquite ash would actually, with a combination of those 2 glazes, would make that blue. And then this piece is also about 22 inches in height. So at this time, I was also experimenting more with not just the traditional bulbous shape, but trying to, play around with angles and sharp angles and directions, having the shapes go in different directions. And this is something I want to get back to. The gold is actually mesquite ash over a raspberry glaze. So it's sprayed on there. And I was trying to develop a yellow glaze using mesquite ash. I was pretty close before I stopped working on it, but it would be time to get back to it. And also with the influence of Ishmael, the wax resist, but he used to have this kind of controlled rose and a stem and petals, leaves that he would put on his pieces. So I wanted to be a little bit more loose and at the same time also layering of glazes. So it's one of my platters, about 20 inches across. And this is another glaze combination with wax resist. I would really like this glaze. It just reminded me of kind of like electricity, lightning with a black over a blue glaze. And then the heat is what makes all this run together. If it didn't get hot enough, it was actually a kind of a boring glaze. But if I was able to get it hot enough to where it runs, I would get this. But at the same time, a little too hot and it ends up on the shelves. So that was always that battle. I have several pieces of glaze on the bottom, mostly jars because they were a little bit more vertical. So when I worked in Clarksville Pottery, well, we sat at the wheel 40 hours a week, or around there. If I wanted all my money, I'd have to work 40 hours. And we worked through about 200 to 250 pieces every week, ranging from mugs, bowls, casseroles, pie plates, cookie jars. They had everything. They had a catalog sold to over 100 galleries across the nation, full-time potters, 2 glazers, 1 kiln loader, somebody to mix clay for us, and a couple of people working slab. And then Bridget's husband, Bill, was shipping and receiving. So, and one of my casserole runs, because we would do batches, right? You look up on the list, you see my name. I would see my name next to the batch. Small casseroles, 20. Go up and ball up the clay, sit down and start making them. And one of my casseroles started kind of wobbling. And rather than try to save it, because it takes more time to try to save than just to throw another one, I just grabbed it, kind of folded it over, went and set it on the table so I could re-wedge it in a few minutes and use it again. And from far away, it looked like somebody robed, and all it was missing was the features, which is the head, hands, feet. And so I just looked at it and started making it when I was at the wheel, put all the pieces together and made a sculpture there in a little while. And that's what got this direction started for me. And eventually they turned into saints. At first they were just figures and mostly high fire with iron oxide. And I used to call them the little homeless, because they would sit or just stand around. I made several. I actually made quite a bit of those. There's some probably at home still in boxes and storage. And I know some, Mario has one. And so there was a show in San Benito, I think it was about 2002, the Guadalupe show. And I was new back to the valley. Somebody told me, hey, there's doing a Guadalupe show. You want to do a piece? Sure. So I made one real quick and painted it with acrylics and put it in the show. It sold. So I figured, gotta keep making these. And the idea that I went with saints was, well, it's got started with the Guadalupe, but also part of the culture in the valley. You see personalities walking around, and I would just wanted to sort of display their, I'll say, how they go about life, the survival. They want to get through, so they'll do odd jobs. It's like hustling, which is part of what I was doing. I was hustling pottery to make a living. So this is a Santo Remedios. So there are some saints that are based on actual saints. Like there's little Teresa, little Saint Teresa is one. And of course, Guadalupe, Virgen of San Juan. And I don't know what's back there. El Santo. And you start to question, like, what is it about saints, right? Mexican American culture that, okay, you need a miracle, you get a certain saint, I forget which one it is, turn him upside down, and then he makes your miracle come through, right? Your petition. And that comes back to sort of like the pre-Columbian times, right? There was that idol worship, the gods. And so when trying to convert the Native Americans, Aztec, Central Americans to Catholicism, there was a little leeway, right? Okay, you wanna worship this God, okay, but it's a new one here. Try this one instead. But also at the same time, the craftsmen were all Native Americans, or most of them. They did all the labor, so I did some reading, and they would actually hide symbols of their former gods in the Christian, like the crosses. They would put mirrors, which goes back to Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror god of the Aztec. So in a way, okay, the Spanish conversion, okay, they're thinking, oh, look, it's working. They're converting to Catholicism. But in some ways, they were actually still hiding the old gods in the new. And you think about that in several generations, it just gets forgotten, and then the new god replaces the old god. And so that's where the saints, I call them folk saints, because on folk sainthood, it's not an official title. They're not canonized. It's the people that give them the importance and the following. So one of the local ones is pretty close, is Don Pedrito Jaramillo. There's a shrine to him in Falfurias. He was a healer, and so he became sort of a folk saint. Now there's a shrine. People go there and light candles, make petitions. I think the place has been burned down once or twice because the miracle didn't come through, right? So they get mad. And so you didn't help me out, I'm gonna burn down your shrine. So and there was El Niño Fidencio, which was another folk healer. I know that Pancho Villa, you can see his candles. He's another folk saint, helps with disputes. He'll come to your side since he's a warrior. And so looking around my surroundings, I see all these people that, they could need a patron saint too, right? Somebody to help them out. So this one became the saint of curanderos, or healers. And I just put some little herbs, and it's got the newspaper on the side to get the air out of the ear. And it's got the manzanilla right in here for the stomach aches. Has a huevo on the back for the ojo. A Vicks, little can of Vicks. So that's his belt, the healer's belt. And then this is one of the ones that's an actual local from Virgen de San Juan. And then El San Paletas, when I had a studio in Mission, there was a paletero that would come by and he told me his stories about how he starts in Monte Cristo Road, makes his way down all the way to the expressway, which is over 10 miles of pushing a cart in the day and trying to make a living out of paletas. I think he told me he got half of whatever he sold and the paleteria got the rest. So they'd pick him up at the end of the day at the end of his shift and take the cart back. The next day they'd go drop him off again, Monte Cristo. So being chased by dogs, dealing with kids, the elements, the weather, 100-degree weather, selling their paletas. So I made a patron saint for the paleteros. And along the way, there's also El Santo. He's already a Santo. So I made El Santo. Yeah, he's actually here, El Santo. And then at the time, poker was what was that? The Texas, what's that called? The Texas Hold'em was hitting pretty big. So I said, okay, well, somebody shouldn't lose all their money, so they need a San Pocar so they can help them out. And he's holding a pair of aces, if you're wondering. So the first one I did actually is more of in this shape. It's more of a seated figure. It does have its feet this way, and it's kind of like meditating. And at first I would just wherever I'd stick the hands out. Then I started adding sleeves to them so that to look a little bit more natural. And Guadalupe has been a popular one. I've done about 5 of these. So some of these they're already in circulation, right? So if one of them sells, somebody else wants one, I'll make another one. And then they vary, they're all handmade. The faces are gonna change. And throughout the years, the feet and hands have actually gotten a little bit bigger. And that's really the features. The feet, they stay barefooted because since they're saints, they got to remain grounded and connected to the earth. And this guy was a little variation of saint personal space. I made this one during the height of the pandemic. Going to the store and people getting too close to me, and I was like, hey, back it up. So I figured I needed one myself to get through this. So it has these nails. Those, I think they're concrete nails. And I just glued those on there. And then there's that peaceful bubble, right? You're just still peaceful, but keep your distance, please. And then there's this guy here, San Carwash. You've probably seen them around town. I know we see them in Brownsville. They wash your cars, whether you need a car wash or not. If they see your car a little dirty, guess what? You're getting a car wash. And so I come out of take my daughter to a music academy downtown Brownsville. I came out and, well, I had a new car wash. Didn't have the money to pay him, but I got him back a few days later. I told him I'd get him. And there he is. I said, you know what? I'm going to pay you the $5 car wash, but I need a picture. I see. All right. So that's him. If you're from Brownsville, you've probably seen him. He might have even washed your car at some point. And he waited for me there, and I made sure I paid him. So I think it was very important that one of the things that we do as artists, it's like we're kind of documenting what's going on around and even the times. So I felt that it was important to include the mask in this. So for future, I don't know, but people will know, okay, this was during the pandemic. When you read in the art history books, right? The Romans, you could date some of their work by the women's hairstyles in the sculptures. You could pinpoint the period the sculpture was made because of the hairstyle. So I figured, okay, we can pinpoint this piece to a certain era. It's during the pandemic. It's the wrong way. And then Santita del Acordeón. This is, I made this for this little person. So I took my daughter to the music academy, and the last thing I thought she'd want to play, right, was the accordion. But she's like, I'll try it. And she tried it, and that's like her favorite thing now. She's in a little conjunto at that academy, which I think is a great thing. They're serving an underprivileged community, and they're starting out at 6 years old, and she's in a conjunto. She's played twice in public already, which is really good. I enjoy watching her and practice. So this is for her, Santita del Acordeón. And when she performed her first time, she actually had to wear a black hat. I just couldn't find any good pictures of her with her outfit. Black hat, black shirt, pants, and boots. So this is gonna be her right there. So in future, you know, I'm always thinking of like, what pieces do I need to make next? You know, I want to make another son elote, but actually serving the elote. The first one I ever made, it's just holding two corns up in the air, right? And it's an actual person I saw on the side of the road, just kind of like me, out in the middle of nowhere. Probably didn't sell any because he wasn't in a good intersection, but he's out there trying, hawking his wares. What else? San Pascual, patron saint of chefs. I've made several of those. So I'm always kind of like looking for what's gonna be the next piece that I'm gonna turn into a folk saint, folk santito. I get suggestions every now and then. People tell me, you know, you should make one of these. Thank you. I'll take that into consideration. So these pieces start out as thrown pieces. You can still see the throwing rings on some of, actually on all of them. You probably see the throwing rings, and they start off as bowls or little casseroles, and I just fold them over. The first one I made, it was by chance, but ever since then, I can actually, now that I have a direction with them, I can form them to kind of make a good piece. And sometimes they don't work out, so I just, okay, that's not a good one. Over here, they're not, I don't have pictures of them. San Aluminio right there. Person going around picking up aluminum cans. And then I got the helping hand guy, and so it's supposed to be kind of like a ladder, and the last step is, you know, the head. That's why you got a little head, a little squashed a little bit. So, and that's you know, I do different work. I also carve wood here and there, do some metal work. I worked as a blacksmith in Austin, Round Rock area for about 4 years at the same time that I was throwing pottery. So I try to combine metal with mesquite wood carvings, but I always, you know, go back to just the pureness of just me sitting at the wheel making pottery and trying to make pottery that comes out, you know, nice or good glazes. The glazes work out. And then I play around with little folk saints, little folk santitos. And then some of them, I never got pictures of them. There. And then that's one of my stations where I used to work for Phil Guile. He's retired this year. It's a little bit of mess because nobody's been in there for years. But that's, for the longest time, that was my little corner. The wheel was set up right here. And those were my shelves. I'd sit there, make pottery, and collect the check, which is always nice. And just keep going, go out to Ishmael's. And he's retired. I was actually started in 1996 with him. And up until this past December, I was still making stuff for him. But that's going to be pretty much the end of the era there. So now I'm just gonna work on my own stuff, right? The dream, can live the dream, work on make a living off your artwork. So that's pretty much what I got presentation. You guys, any questions you may have, feel free to ask. If not, I'll be walking around. You can hit me up around here. And that way we can, oh, you have a question? Glazes?
Little mic.
Have you tried using glazes for the little?
I
details?
tried some glazes on them, but the reason I went with the paint was, since I was working in the folk tradition, it reminded me of these figurines that you can find in Mexico, that they do use actual paint, and some of them are really pretty crude, right? You got the little flat hands with the lines, and the feet the same way, kind of like weird faces sometimes because they're made real quick. So I decided to stay with the acrylic paint for that reason, because I figured, okay, I'm working in the folk art tradition as an influence, right? So I want to do this and also have more control of the colors. So it's not really, I mean, if you think about ceramics is more of the art and science of making stuff with clay and chemicals. So it's more of a mixed media pieces. They're sculptural pieces. So it's terracotta. Most of these are terracotta. And then I apply a gesso, and then I paint over the gesso. And sometimes the lighting I paint inside my house is a little bit rough. So once I go outside and see them in the sun, like, oh, I gotta fix some stuff. Yeah, that's a good question. Anybody else? Everybody good? Okay, so I know we have another presentation. I'll give the floor to Carla. Gotta click that on.
All right. I have notes because I forget things. I don't know how to get it on. There we go. Does that work? Okay. Thank you. Test, test, 1, 2, 3. I'll be speaking probably louder than that.
People knew that the safety was kind of the focus, because this is our first time with the opening and 2 speakers at once. So we had round 1. And we'll roll into round 2, which should be another flavor of very good. So we'll turn it over to Carla to tell her side of the story.
Hi. I have notes because I'm not a teacher like Julian, and sometimes I forget things. I work by myself in my studio a lot. So, oh, this is a lot of people. So, yes, thank you. It's exciting. I'm not necessarily going to go as far back as Julian, although I have been making artwork for, I mean, seriously, for almost 20 years now. I did start in Austin. I found one day I had always been a writer and I had writer's block. So I went to take a sculpture class to loosen things up, and I never left. After that first semester of sculpture class, I built a very large piece in second sculpture 2, and it fell down numerous times. It was a big copper piece. And I was like, man, I should probably go learn how to build things if I really want to do this. So I went to learn how to weld. And by the time I got back down to the valley, I had spent many years in Austin welding, worked a summer for Ishmael Soto, and that was magic. That was just a magical summer in my life. That was the same year I met my husband. That was the same year I got pregnant with my first child. And one of the reasons that I went to welding instead of pottery at the time was because the welders I knew were making a lot more money. And I had to raise some kids. And so yeah, I welded professionally for a number of years and learned how to build things for real in factories and in small shops. And we came back down here and I got a job working for AOC. It's now Praxair. It was our welding supply company here. And I actually applied to work inside in the air conditioning. And they were like, oh no, you know how to do this special kind of welding. So we need you to come fix all of the stainless steel tanks. So I wound up outside welding again for about another year. And then I was like, I'm done with sparks in my face. And so I went back to school. And that was here at UTPA, or over there at UTPA. The picture on the right of the birds is my senior BFA show. I worked with Mr. Heisland towards the end of his career, and the time in the studio with him was just phenomenal. He was a chemist and I love glazing. And so we spent a lot of time talking about chemistry and glaze, but he was only there for about a semester before he started getting really sick again. And he was gone most of the time. So I was on my own and did whatever I wanted to. And that's how you get an 18-foot installation for your senior show, because there was nobody to tell me no. But I find, so that's my truest love, is doing installation work like that. But outside of a university system, it's really hard to get to make those pieces, and much less to make money making them. Eventually, I would take that piece apart and use it as a fundraiser to go to Chautauqua to do a residency that was a 7-week residency. And had a really great time, met a lot of great people, and they influenced my life to this day. Making pots though, and setting up for sale is so much like making an installation piece. I'll work in small batches. I've never been a production potter, and I cannot make 200 pieces in a week. Never. I think I would go crazy. Even now I can't make the same thing 2 weeks in a row. So I'll work on a small batch of pots at a time, and they all kind of get decorated together. You know, I have a very small kiln, so this is probably about 2 kiln loads full, maybe a little more. But yeah, I really like how the two seem to mimic each other, and I really love exploring all of that. Oh, am I hitting the wrong button? Where do I point it? There we go. Okay. I graduated from UTPA in 2013. Thank you very much. And took over the spare bedroom in our house. I didn't have a kiln, so I was building things at home and then sneaking back up to UTPA. Hey guys, remember me? That summer I did get to go to Penland. Had a work study scholarship and got to work in the kitchen, and that was grueling. That was an amazing 3 weeks, but I did not sleep the whole time. I drove to North Carolina for that workshop with Ken Baskin, who does amazing crusty glazes like this. And yes, I still sometimes use those for sculpture. Drove about 4 hours on my way home and then stopped at the hotel and went to sleep because it was just nonstop. And if any of you want to pursue any kind of craft, I would definitely suggest going to Penland. I was really inspired by the works of Noguchi. I really loved his furniture, especially. And that's what inspired those pieces. This is the next year, the next summer at Chautauqua. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. almost 10 years later, that I was making pieces that were specifically about anxiety. And I look at these now as, 40-plus-year-old, and I'm like, how did I not know that 10 years ago? That was a really great time. I met some really important people in my life. My studio mate there at Chautauqua is still in my life. She's amazing. And some of the visiting artists are still great sources of inspiration to me. We were talking today about Brian Hopkins. He sat in my studio with me at Chautauqua and walked me through why I was making what I was making. And it's really important to have those people in your life to help you sort all that out. The next one, the next year. So I came home. I had had a solo show at Alex Caminos's place, kind of slapdash, sure, let's do this. But then Jessica McBride called me from Beyond Arts Gallery in Harlingen, which sadly is no longer there, but was an anchor for our Harlingen arts community for a number of years. And she asked me if I would like to have a solo show there. And I jumped at the chance because that was a whole big room like this that I could fill with just what I had been making. And I had started making these pieces that are actually pots, but they hung on the wall. So many times in school, I was left out of shows. I wouldn't get asked to do shows because they were in really strange places and it all had to hang on the wall. They didn't want any freestanding sculpture because it'd be in a bar and a restaurant, just crazy places. So I actually started making them so that they would hang on the wall. And I wanted them to look dangerous so nobody would want to bump into them. And they kept people away. You don't want to bump into them. They're pretty solid. I took these pieces actually to, I was invited this next year to do the East Austin studio tour with an artist that I had worked for a time. Jennifer Chenoweth was a painter. She now runs the Umlauf Sculpture Garden, but I worked with her for a number of years prepping canvases for her and organizing her studio. This was in that same show. These are some of the first pieces that I was making in my own backyard. We bought a house in 2014. I applied to 3 grad programs and I got waitlisted for one and got told no for all the others. So we're like, okay, I guess we're gonna buy a house with a studio in the backyard because what else am I gonna do? And these are the first pieces I made out of that home studio. So the bottom on this piece and the cage part are all steel. And then the middle kind of diamond shaped piece is a ceramic. Still using those sculptural glazes. I like them to be crusty and talking about decay. Oh, and here's the top. So it hung, those hooks fit into the ceramic piece and hung from the metal top. That's since been purchased. And that top one is actually inspired by that myth, the Sword of Damocles. I've always been really interested in power dynamics specifically, which is one of the reasons why I like the decay stuff. But the idea of the Sword of Damocles is that the sword hangs over the king, waiting to drop on him at all times. And the title of that piece is actually, "You be the king, I'll be the sword." And then I started to make pots seriously. I was very proud of that stack of plates. I still have some. Jared has some. My mom and dad have some of those. But I also took them out to sell here in the Rio Grande Valley, and people actually laughed at me. They're like, what do we do with this white stuff? Like, you mean you don't ship these in from somewhere? Some people picked up the pieces and saw that they were like $35 and laughed at me. It was kind of heartbreaking. I did not sell anything that day. My kids were with me. We learned a very valuable lesson. Pick your venue carefully. I came back home and started putting more color on them, and that's the piece in the middle. And that one is actually inspired by some Belgian potters that did really fantastic work. So one of the things that I say to artists all the time, young artists who ask me if they can show in my space or how I got to start showing or how something happened for me, I tell them time and again, apply to juried shows. K-Space Contemporary, they just closed the call actually for the Third Coast National Show. They host this, it's a biennial, they have it every 2 years, and they always invite somebody to jury the show. And people from all over the nation will send in their artwork for this show. I got into it 1 year, I've applied 4 times, I've gotten in once. And that's okay, like, it's all right. But that one time that I got in, I drove to Corpus to drop the piece off. And I asked them, do you ever have ceramic shows, like shows of pottery? And one of the young ladies said, no, we haven't, but you could always propose one. And then the lady who ran the gift shop came up and was like, oh, I love that piece. Do you have more things like it? And I was like, well, I've been making these bowls. So they put it in their very small at the time gift shop. I was in there about a year. And then I got an email from the lady who runs it, Michelle Smythe, and she asked me if I wanted to have a small show in their gift shop space. So it was really just the 2 walls you see there. The other side of that little space was a couple of shelves with local goods made. And so from that one submission, okay, so from that 4 submissions and that 1 acceptance, that led to me having an actual place for my pots and then being invited to do sculpture for them. The piece that's here, while I was hanging the show, a gallerist from Houston walked in just to see what was going on and saw that piece, bought it off the wall and invited me to have a show in his gallery in Houston. So now off of those 4 submissions and 1 acceptance, I've got a gift shop to put my pots in, and I've had 2 solo shows off of that 1 piece. You know, just keep, for those of y'all who are young artists, just keep doing it, because there's a lot of no's out there. But that was a fun show. I had a good time. And it's so weird to look at those now and to see those heavy chains hanging from the wall. All the chain is handmade out of clay. I sat in my studio for hours and did that. This piece here is actually 2 separate ceramic pieces that are sewn together and held apart by upholstery string. And I purposely picked upholstery string because it would last forever. What do we got next? Aha, the color starts to really show up. So we all know what happened in 2016. And we know that on social media, people really started fighting. And that was, I mean, that was my family, that was my friends. That's 2018 is the year I left Facebook for good. But I was thinking really hard about how do we talk to each other now? And there are things that we purposely don't talk about anymore. And okay, maybe that's all right. My mom tells me all the time, don't bring that up at Thanksgiving. And so I decided that I was going to start making pots that would get people's attention, but you serve food on them. And that was very important to me for a good period of time. I'm really into vases right now for whatever reason, but serving dishes were really important to me in 2018. I went to a workshop at Eye of the Dog Art Center, which Chris was at also, and took students to. Yeah. It was a really good workshop. Yeah. He's in North Carolina and he makes really great work. Something had happened in my studio right before I went to this. We had a gas leak. And so I had to give up my beloved gas kiln that helps get all those crusty surfaces and helps make chemistry happen in a kiln. Julian talked about it, getting things to run and to bleed. And, you know, you start with something that's green and it turns red if you do it right. And just really amazing things happen in a gas kiln. Well, we had a gas leak and we could not afford to get it fixed. But the gas company said, oh, well, we'll fix it, but we're going to put your meter by your house. So that bypassed everything in the yard. I can no longer have my probably illegal gas kiln in my backyard. So I was now doing firing solely out of my bisque firing kiln. And for those of y'all who don't do ceramics, we fire twice. We fire once bisque to halfway, and then we take it out, we glaze it, decorate it, whatever, and put it back in and fire it again. So I had a kiln just for bisque firing, and now I'm doing all of my firing out of that. None of my glazes worked. I was a little bit panicked. I had to reassess quickly. And then this workshop shows up just 4 hours north of where I live with this guy who does these really colorful, fun dishes, and glazing isn't quite such a problem anymore. And so I started mixing my own slip. I'm a little bit of a control freak with color. I want it just right. If you've been in my studio, I have a whole 8-foot pegboard just covered in color samples. And they start with the lowest gradation and get brighter, and it's all nice and neat. I've recently changed clay, so it's not as neat as it was as I start to try them out on all the new stuff. So this pot helped me find my voice in ceramics, like fully. I knew that I was going to be making this style of pots for a while. And this is actually something this was part of a conversation. This pot is probably about 18 inches tall. It's the biggest hand-built pot I've ever made. It's coil built, and it's gonna cuss, y'all, so just be prepared. But this was in direct answer to some of the allegations that were made about our then president and the backlash from people saying that it wasn't that bad. And if you have never been assaulted, then yeah, it wasn't that bad. But if you have, that thing was horrible. And it brought back a flood of emotion, not just from me, but from many women I knew, some men too. So yeah, this pot lives in my studio. And right now it's on this side. But one day it might say that again. It's just turned to the side. So that piece from before that looks like a church with the chains coming out. So the person who bought that owns Red Bud Gallery in Houston. And when I delivered that piece to him about 6 months later, he invited me to have a show. And I had been reading a lot about race in America because things were really coming to a head after 2016, and was really interested in the things that we were burying, but also the things that make us community. And it's hard to talk about race. We have a hard time talking about race. I don't even know how to talk about it at this point, but I need to find ways to, because it's something that's very important to American history. And if we don't get to the bottom of it, it's not going to be great. That's the only way to move forward. So as I'm trying to figure out how to talk about it, I start reading specifically about diaspora and food, and the food that was brought and the traditions that were brought over on slave ships, whether, however you want to look at that. And I also started, because of the food, I was also thinking about plants a lot in our current environment. So I was looking at a lot of seed pods, thinking about how tribes all over the world would catch fish in very similar ways. This large piece here is actually based off of our traditional fish trap. They're baskets that are woven in a cone shape, a double cone shape. So the fish swims into the little cone and can't get back out, and it's trapped in the other cone. But at the same time, there's also, this is supposed to be like a little buoy, but there's also a handmade building plum, talking about the structures of society and how we build those and how we can choose how we build those. And the other piece is really about being mired, stuck in this thing that we don't want to talk about. And that's how a huge portion of our population got here. So it's a boat form held in place by six steel rods, and then all strung together with cotton thread. And cotton was important to me. My family definitely was part of the King Cotton of RGV. And it's definitely something that is a huge part of our history here and across America. I had to let that go for a little while because it's some heavy reading and it's a real reconciliation in your own head, coming to terms with your own ancestry and their role. And how do we move forward? I still don't know, but I'm still reading about it and I'm still going to make pieces about it. But I do know that we like to break bread and we like to eat together, and cultures across the nation, across the world, all turn to color to remind us of the joyous times in our lives. And there's no denying, I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley. This is a very colorful place. People didn't like those white pots because that's not our culture. You know, I like them because I like seeing the really beautiful food on them. But the reality is that we are a very colorful, vibrant culture. And so I took the lessons that I learned from Kurt Anderson's workshop and started applying them to my pots here, and started throwing more. I really like to hand build. This pitcher is one of my first hand built pitchers. It didn't pour well either. I don't usually make these pitchers with pouring them in mind. I'm actually looking more at the movement of the piece, so it leans forward, just like us. And some more. Lots of eyes watching, you know, always playing witness, taking it in, making sure somebody sees what's going on. I don't know how I would actually recount the last, I don't know, nearly 10 years now of American history, but I do know I've been watching it and I'm filtering it through my artist lens, and I know it's going to come out. I've got some more pieces of sculpture in mind. I'm looking forward to building those in the next year. The pot of the eyes with the tears here is called We're Taking a Collection. Because it just seems, and even now after Uvalde, it seems like it's still happening. It's just still more of the same. Still more of the same. And this is last year's mugs, and they morph a little bit. I found a glaze that I like that helps put movement back in everything. It runs just a little bit when it's got cobalt under it, and gives some more movement to the pieces so they don't seem so static. And I think this is the last, oh, no, this is this year's. Oh, so there's a new change happening because it always changes, it always grows. And as I start to not want to spend quite so much time choosing the color and decorating, I find myself wanting to carve small things again, like way back when I was a kid. And I've been stamping pieces and putting solid color glazes on things again. I even have some that are white. I've come full circle, and I'm going to let myself do that because I love them. There was a really great oops that happened with my white glaze. I have an example in the ceramic studio. It didn't turn out white, but it turned out something else, and it's really beautiful. And I have come into being a potter more and more over the last few years. Dinnerware's coming, and they'll have the beautiful oops glaze on it that some of my best friends really love. And I'll keep making pots, and I'll keep watching, and I'll keep reading, and I hope y'all do the same. That's all. Right. You want to do the question? Okay. So does anybody have any questions? I might have answers. I might have more questions.
All right. Is this fine? Okay. So I want a mug. And
Oh.
I believe it's ceramic. I'm guessing. I don't know anything about the specific material, but whenever I grab it, there's this, it feels like it's gonna crack. So can you repair that? Or is it possible to repair it?
To repair mugs.
The handle specifically. That's the most important part.
Oh, so yes, if you know what kind of clay it is, if you know what temperature it was fired to, if it is the handle like loose.
No.
Did I make this cup?
No. No.
Okay, I'm like, hey,
No,
I
this-
got mugs. We will replace it right now.
This was at a souvenir shop in Houston, which I won't name, but it seems sturdy, but the moment you lift it up, the weight, there's a certain it feels like it's gonna fall, but it's not loose. And there's a specific noise too.
So possibly it's just that the handle's too small for the mug. So the first round of mugs I ever really made, like really made mugs, I did not use them. I gave them to people, and there was one that was left over, and I took it home and I put a nice cup of hot tea in it, and I realized it didn't work. The handle was not shaped properly, and when it was full of tea, it wanted to tip over, and it was hot, and I couldn't hold on to it. So it put me back in the studio to redesign my handles. So it could just be that the handle doesn't suit your mug, you
Right.
know?
Oh, and I forgot to clarify that this happens when there's nothing in the mug.
Yeah, it sounds like the mug's too heavy for the size handle you have or the shape. Like,
Right.
you know, when I was told many years ago that every potter has to have a mug, and I was like, nah, no. I mean, I can make other kinds of pots, but it's not true. Like, that's where we really work on our designs, and we handle our things and we use them and make sure that they're usable. I would love to see this mug and we can critique it together.
I will have to look for it. It's in the box somewhere. I didn't throw it away, but I must look for it.
Right
Yeah.
on.
If we meet again, yeah, I'll definitely bring it. Okay, and I guess that's my question.
Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. She's been trying.
Thank you. I'm gonna give this back to them. Yes, because it doesn't sound like they have questions.
It's all good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending the presentation. We really appreciate you all coming together and like appreciating like all these artists' hard work. And so, yeah, let's give them one more round of applause. Do you have any final words to say?
Well, enjoy the show, folks. There were a lot of people that made it happen. So we're really happy to have Carla and Julian here and you all here. And from Gina to the fantastic folks that work the technology so we can see it in the gallery. And if you're watching at home, just enjoy now. Thank you guys very much. Tomorrow, 9 to noon, take a clay class, make a mug. If it breaks, what did Julian say? Oh, you make another one or you make it into a sculpture. So opportunity abounds.
Awesome.